In today's business world, change is the only constant, and mastering transformation is the ultimate key to success. Welcome to Shift and Thrive. I'm your host, Natalie Nathanson. Each week, we'll bring you conversations with CEOs who delve into how they successfully drove critical change in their organization. This show is sponsored by Magnitude Consulting, bringing you the thinking power of a growth consultancy and the getting it done power of a full-service B2B marketing agency. I am very excited to introduce today's guest. He is a seasoned entrepreneur and enterprise technology leader with nearly 30 years of experience building and scaling software and technology businesses. After starting his career in the U.S. Air Force, he then went into the private sector and built, grew, and eventually sold an IT services company, after which point he turned his focus to software. He's also the author of several books, including Lessons from the Edge of Business Disaster, where he shares candid lessons from some of the toughest moments entrepreneurs can face. And I know we'll be getting into some of that in the conversation today. He is the CEO and founder of HighGear, software that helps highly regulated organizations manage and automate critical business processes. Vaughn Thurman, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me. It's an honor, and I appreciate that very kind introduction.
Thank you. Very well deserved. And I'm looking forward to getting into conversation. And I know, you've navigated some pretty high stakes situations through your entrepreneurial journey. And there's one in particular that was a trying time. I know it was a number of years back, but would love if you could just walk us through the situation you were facing, and then we can kind of unpack some of what you took away from that experience. So can you start by taking us through that moment?
Yeah, you bet. And I share it in my first book, Lessons from the Edge, because it really sort of draws people into the crisis of the moment. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs face those kinds of moments or fear facing them a lot more than they let on. I think there's kind of a tribal code that we should all tell everybody. Say, how's business? You say, oh, good, and whether it's good or not. And so the reality is, I was one of those guys who was really good at giving people the high five and telling them things were going great on my end. And I wouldn't lie, but I would find the 4 good things I could come up with and avoid the terrible ones until they kind of piled up on me. And there was this key moment. My middle son was turning 10 years old. And that evening was his birthday party, relatives and friends coming over. And during the course of that day, the bank had already sent me a letter a week earlier telling me that they wanted to call in the lines of credit and all of the credit facilities that we had with them. And the bad news was that if I couldn't address that in 30 days, they were going to address it through the collateral, and the collateral was my home. I was one of those entrepreneurs who signed there and said, what's that matter? We're never going to have risks here anyway. And the truth is, we hadn't missed a payment, but we had broken covenants. We weren't hitting the profitability margins that we were expecting, and we'd had a critical shock to the system. 2 customers that represented 60% of our revenue. One was 40, the other was 20. I learned a lot about concentration then, and I don't mean staring at something and memorizing it, but the idea that my revenue was concentrated in just a couple of key accounts, and that 60% of our revenue, 22 days apart, both walked out for different reasons. One was acquired and said, hey, we need the keys. This is it today. Sue us if you want to, the contract's over. The other one showed up 22 days later and assumed they were going to do the same thing, but really gave us about a 9-month ramp down. But the reality was we went through a financial shock just after we'd grown the company a great deal. And the bank got a look at the impact on our financials to trying to recover to that and said they wanted out. And like I said, a handful of days later, I got a tap on the door. The day that my son was going to have his birthday party, we got a tap on the front door, and there's more to the story. I tell in the book, but the long and short of it is it was the IRS, and it was a collections agent from the IRS coming personally because we were 2 quarters behind on payroll taxes. And I wasn't aware of the gravity of the situation. I knew we'd been 1 quarter behind before and paid fees for it. I didn't realize my relatively inexperienced finance leader at that point thought, well, if we borrow 1 quarter and pay some fees, why not borrow 2 quarters? We'll pay double the fees, and that'll help us right now with cash flow. But they came in a little heavier, and they said, we're looking for you to pay about as much as we owed the bank, and we're going to give you 10 days to do it. And if you don't, we're probably going to bar the door, and we may take you to jail. The heaviness of the moment kind of landed on me, and I realized I was going to have to learn how to run a business that now had two very powerful entities, both who had the legal power to change my life, to change the way that business was functioning radically. And I was going to have to figure out how to get through this and keep the business running, or I was going to have a life level crisis. And so that kind of draws you into the moment. I guess I'll sort of stop there and see where you want to take that.
Yeah. I mean, I can't even imagine the stress or the strain that was kind of happening at that time. And I'm sure there's a number of things kind of operationally that you did to get through it. But I'm wondering, like, what did you do on the kind of more emotional side, right? You must have had a lot of resilience to kind of pull through that. Do you remember kind of what you told yourself? What
Yeah.
helped you?
Yeah. I can tell you that I didn't handle it very well for about a week. I kind of I looked for people to blame. Somebody said to me around that time one time, you're never really a failure until you fail to own what got you there. And it sort of challenged me and made me realize that nobody had gotten me there but me. I signed the agreements making my house collateral for bank loans. I delegated responsibility for tax payments to new employees without setting clear boundaries and rules. And those are a lot of things that make you a much more experienced business person very quickly, as you work your way through that. But I think about a week along, part of it, I'm faith is a big component for me. I really ended up having to sort of plead to God for some help there. But I also had a series of lessons that began to come along probably over the course of the following 3 months, where I think I put the foundation in place for a real turnaround. That business, I got it very successful, growing, profitable, and got it sold a number of years later, and it was a terrific turnaround. But I certainly was not qualified to do a turnaround. I wasn't qualified even to run the business. I felt like when all of that went on. But what I began to learn, I went to customers that I thought I could never afford to lose this customer. And if they find out what's going on, they'll certainly run for the hills. But I learned humility, that there's a disarming power of humility. I went to clients that I desperately needed, and I said, look, I'm in trouble, and I know we can get through this. I'm determined I'm going to get through it. And I think I had to believe that before I could go tell anybody that. I had to get down to that kind of gut level resolve and say, I'm not going to let this burn me. I didn't need to tell everybody every detail, right? It's not necessary to volunteer every level or every component of every crisis that you go through as an entrepreneur. But I got real with some of my biggest customers, and it was amazing. Some of them found a lot more work for me, and they weren't wasting money. They just said, these are things that we've been thinking about doing, but we'll rush and get them done now because we get it. You need it. We don't want to lose a good vendor. We had folks who said, listen, why don't you start charging me half up front? And I thought, that's a great idea. I started asking other large customers, will you pay half up front for what I do? And, so we had to learn how to improve our cash flow. But part of learning how to improve our cash flow meant that we had to get real in front of important customers and ask for their help. And that same humility, I began to have to express that by going to other people who were running businesses and who I had been wasting the relationships. When they would say, how you doing, Vaughn? How's business? I would say, I'm doing great, and business is great. And again, it wasn't a lie, but it was certainly leaving out the truth. And when I went back to some of those folks and said, I'm in trouble. I'm having one heck of a hard time. I began to find people who weren't sure they believed me before anyway, very willing to coach, counsel, advise, and even support in ways that I didn't think they would. And so I found out the hard way that I was lacking authenticity and transparency and humility in the way that I was doing business. And I had a turnover in employees. They were frustrated. They didn't want to hang out and support a guy who was always claiming things were going great when they could tell behind the scenes things were rough. Um, but when I began to really get down to earth real with people and let them know that I needed their help, I found out something remarkable about people. Human beings really want to be needed. And it isn't a manipulative tactic. It's that it was real. I really needed them. And when I was willing to be humble enough to tell them I needed their help, I created a place for them to lead. I created a place for them to grow. I created a place for their work to matter, for their customer relationship to matter. And I felt like at that point, I went from being somebody who wanted very badly to be a success and was trying to hold up the pretend version of me that looked like success, to somebody who began to succeed by discovering how much I needed the help of others. So I wish I could tell you it was some overnight transition. It just happened like that. But I think, a lot of it happened in 3 months with me having to learn to get humble in front of customers and employees. And then there was a lot more that I learned over the following 5 years during what looked like a flat line, but underneath we rebuilt the foundation of the business. We rebuilt a lot of the relationships and got it to where it took off again and became very attractive to one of our large competitors that was growing, growing all around the country through acquisition.
That's amazing. I know you said you're not a turnaround CEO, but through that experience, clearly you showed that you could do the right things to bring that full circle. I know there's, I find there's a fear of vulnerability, right? And that's why I think your experience talking to clients, talking to the team in that way is so powerful. And I think you're spot on that like humans want to be needed. I really like that. And I think there's a humanization that even though we're in business to business, it's all people at the end of the day. And if you have a strong, client relationship, that can go such a long way.
Yeah, that's well said. And I think it's also what's the right way for me to say it? There's a vacuum, just like there's a vacuum for leadership, there's a vacuum for authenticity. People that desire for people to be needed, they experience that in business as well. Your business matters to a lot of folks that are vendors to you and to your employees and to your customers. And the relationship that you have with them can be great because you're delivering great services, but it doesn't become a human relationship until it becomes vulnerable. And it's funny. Some of the best customers we have are folks that we let down somewhere and had to admit the truth about it, even when they weren't sure they knew it was us. So I would have to say, yeah, I've learned some turnaround skills, but man, I wish I'd never gotten in the situation to force me to learn all those things. But what ultimately came out of it all is that I learned that transparent and authentic and humble way of doing business was so much better in terms of the human relationship component and the loyalty that it engendered, and the way our customers would fight for us to keep us in there. We brought that into the way we do business in the software company as well, and I think even more effectively. But yeah, that's kind of a long way rambling around to your question there.
Yeah. Can you talk to me? You said you brought that into your current company. Can you talk about how that's taken shape in the current business?
Yeah, well, we're a culture um, that is based on core values, and we keep those core values. We keep our mission, our vision up on the wall. We really keep people focused, and you'll hear one of them in there. Passion, humility, teamwork, integrity. That's our focus. But unlike what a lot of companies do, where I think the executive team goes off into a closet or a conference room somewhere and decides what they want to aspire to, we asked our team to do it themselves. We asked them to try to figure out who we were. And so one of the guys took the lead and surveyed everybody, and then they had group meetings, and they tried to figure out what were the four things that actually represented the way we made decisions today. And they were that we're passionate about helping our customers, we're humble, we think our customers are more important than we are, that we always want to be able to ask a question if there's something we don't know instead of making a claim. The teamwork piece, the integrity piece, we had a lot of stories around that. So we put that up on the wall, but then we held ourselves accountable to make our decisions based off of that, our hiring decisions, our firing decisions. Is this customer a good fit for us kind of decisions? And I introduced that to the whole team and said, this is something that is not a vision we're aspiring to be one day. It's not a marketing statement we're hoping our customers or future customers will believe about us. This is our set of core values, and this is what we want you as the team to feel like you can fire us as the leadership. Not that we're giving you the right to fire, but the truth is, if we have a member of our leadership team that isn't living up to those values, they don't belong here. Uh, and so what we had learned out of that was that when we were a valueless company, and I don't mean that we didn't have economic value, but when we weren't driven by values in that technology services company, but only by performance, not only did our performance get hurt, but our values, the weakness of our values were what made it so difficult to turn our performance around. So like I said, it's hiring and firing decisions. If someone lies and it hurts us internally, we might have grace on them one time. But if somebody's got a habit of lying to customers, we're going to let them go no matter how well they perform. And it's the same thing. We've had interview cycles where everybody's excited about a candidate, but they'll end up expressing a behavior that we realize would be incompatible with the organization. And we make the decision that we've got to make a change, regardless of how excited we are about the potential for their performance. Because what we've learned is performance is fleeting, right? You can get performance to go up 5 or 10% in a quarter or in a year, by hiring the right resumes, by offering the right products, by partnering with the right companies. But sustainable growth and sustainable operations are really run by cohesive teams of people that know in the morning what it is your organization wants to get done by the end of the day. And so that's how we brought that across. I think, also having learned some of those tough financial lessons, one of the things I really changed, we believe in keeping a significant cash reserve and always working to be profitable, every single month. And that forces us to make tough decisions. But it was a lesson that I learned. We at that point, we were growing at all costs, and I didn't understand the costs. The other part I didn't tell you about that story, about that disaster in the other business, I was growing by 50% a year. And everybody was amazed with our growth, but I had no concern for whether or not we were profitable as long as we kept growing. I just wanted the numbers to go up, and that kept making us vulnerable. And I wasn't working on keeping enough reserves in place. I didn't really invest in those banking relationships and investor relationships, and that's something also that I brought along. Is I've just learned that we don't carry any debt, but I keep a good relationship with bankers, and I talk to any investor that wants to talk to us, and give them the same transparency and authenticity. Because if we get into a situation where we need some help, I don't want that to be the first time I've talked to somebody when I need to come to them humbly and tell them I need some help.
Yeah. I think too, you mentioned kind of not growth at all costs, that I think that can be very alluring. And I'm surprised in many ways how still so much of business awards, like industry awards, are fastest growing company, versus thinking of kind of metrics for healthiest company, right? Happiest clients, team satisfaction and longevity. So I think it's interesting to see the dichotomy between those.
Yeah, Jim Collins talked about that a lot in his first three books, Good to Great, Great by Choice, and How the Mighty Fall. The difference between sustainable growth and flash growth, right? Whether you're actually building an organization of leaders or an organization of followers. And That was another thing I think I had to change a lot. I didn't read enough. I thought I was the smartest guy in the room, and by fortune of genetics or something like that, I was born able to learn and comprehend things pretty quickly. But it's a danger for an entrepreneur or a leader, especially, to think that they've arrived. I think my attitude has really changed over the years. The more experience I gain, the more I've learned, the more I know how to do, the more I feel like I'm becoming a student. And I approach every situation, every customer opportunity, every interview with a new potential employee as an opportunity to learn. And being a perpetual student has done much better for my bank account than when I was the perpetual know-it-all who thought everybody liked me, and quite frankly, I was probably driving everybody crazy with that wrong attitude.
Hey, this is Natalie, your Shift and Thrive host. After chatting with lots of CEOs, one thing is crystal clear. Leveling up your company means having a killer go-to-market strategy. That's what my crew at Magnitude Consulting does every day. If you're trying to step up your marketing game, whether it's strategizing, accelerating your pipeline, expanding into new markets, or getting into AI and automation, let's talk. No pitch, no pressure, just good conversation. Visit shiftandthrivepodcast.com/Natalie to schedule a time. Can't wait to connect. I want to talk a little bit about the space that you're in, and I know your organization helps with better processes and workflow systems. Can you talk about kind of what the industry is facing and kind of what some of your customers are navigating in their organizations?
Yep. So we have two products out of that company. In fact, here I'm going to pull the book up, right? So for whatever it's worth, I'll stick that up for a minute. The process of improvement, I highly recommend it, of course. We've taken 20 years of being able to watch some of the biggest organizations in the world use our software to drive process improvement efforts. We, of course, don't name the ones that did badly, but we do give credit to a few that have done it very well. We learned, as I was just talking about, asking questions, being a student. We frankly learned more from our customers than they've learned from us. And we've taken a lot of those stories and turned them into the form of a guide to take someone who wants to take on process improvement from kind of zero to really a corporate world-class effort, and set it up into a series of steps that are part process improvement, but also part psychology of change. And both of those are relevant right now with kind of the big AI wave that's coming at everybody, and everybody's trying to figure out, what do I do with that? And when it comes down to those two things, it's just a process improvement. It's just digital transformation. It's just the next wave. Just like RPA, robotic process automation, before it offered the ability to do things that people could do before, but it could do it quicker and easier as long as they were repetitive. AI is offering the same kinds of capabilities, but with the add-on of the ability to think and process, and the agentic capabilities to do things with less direction. But even some of the RPA tools were beginning to get to that point where they were running headless and they could get things done. So there's on one side the question of, what can we have technology do to help make our people more productive, and then on the other side there's the psychology of, how can we lead our people through that change without them being terrified or running for the hills or resisting it. And there are some changes that come along like this, like the internet did, like the cloud did, like RPA did through financial services, and certainly AI is one of them that is inevitable. There's not much that we can do to avoid it. It's a change that's coming, and so it affects companies like us. We're embracing it and embedding it. We've just released some new technology that allows people to take, or to specify agentic steps and take data from HighGear, from workflows, and send it out to their favorite AI brain and have it come back in with some intelligence applied and improve the workflow. But at the end of the day, what I think a lot of our customers are facing out there right now is not unique to our industry. It's uncertainty. Uh, the folks that we serve in financial services, I mentioned we have two products, HighGear, which is what the company's named for, primarily serves financial services, energy, and government. And financial services right now is doing well from a financial perspective. A lot of those customers are, but they're dealing with a lot of uncertainty. I think there's a lot of housekeeping happening right now around the world, and so there's a lot of dust getting kicked up as the carpets are getting shaken out, and people are trying to figure out where things are going. And so it puts pressure on them to want to try to find efficiencies of scale, but at the same time, it also makes them nervous about making changes unless they feel like they've got a little bit of a net beneath them to figure out how to address it. And energy is the same thing. Energy prices are very high right now. When you and I are recording this, they may be low in 2 weeks. They were low 2 weeks ago. Nobody really knows where that's going. And so, people are having trouble making wild investments, and AI is coming along saying it's offering this, potential to really change everything, but nobody's quite sure where they can get the ROI out of it. And so with our software, we have really taken an approach of embedding agentic AI in a very controlled way so that business analysts and people who think like them, who may not have a cybersecurity degree and may not think about the rule of three of the three things you never want to do together to have agentic AI leak your data out on the web, and give them a safe environment where they can actually build end-to-end workflows and interact with sophisticated agentic AI in a safe way.
Yeah. I think there's an interesting element of, and you touched on this, of the market readiness, right? There's like, where's the technology and is that ready for prime time? There's the other kind of systems and your data. And even if the technology is there, you might not be ready for it. And then the change management piece. And you talked a bit about the psychology of change being such an important component. I'm curious just how you think about that. And, for other listeners, other CEOs and founders, especially, what kinds of things should they be keeping in mind around the psychology of change
Mm.
in this sphere?
Yeah, there's a fantastic book. I can't recommend it enough. It's called The Motive. I would say that if you're an audiobook kind of person, you could consume it in 2 hours. I think I played it on 1.25 speed and got through it in 2 hours. I had a 1 hour trip somewhere, and on somebody's advice, listened to it on the way there and on the way back. And I think one of the things that's really important in the psychology of change was really reiterated in that book. Um, there are times that I repeat myself a lot when I'm talking to my staff. I'm sharing the same ideas over and over because I want to burn it into their brains, and I worry, like, am I annoying them? Am I doing my job? It was great to listen to that book because he said, no, I am a CRO, and the guy said, oh, you mean a chief revenue officer? He said, no, chief repeating officer, right? I repeat the same things over and over again until they become having the values on the wall don't matter if people can't remember them, right? So I say them all the time. I remind them, I bring them up in conversation. When I say something is our strategy for this quarter, people hear it from me at every monthly meeting and every small group meeting. I remind them of what our North Star is. And I think, that's the first thing in change management. People are always terrified of getting on a bus or a train car or wherever else if they don't know where they're going. And so it's really important that they know where they're going. And I have seen a lot of organizations do a really bad job at that um, because they think they've got it hidden in the back room. There'll be a C-suite appointed team of change management experts meeting in behind closed doors. And of course, it's usually glass walls so everybody can see something they've written down about the coming change. And the rumors run rampant around the organization about what's coming and how bad it's going to be. And they still think it's a secret, and they've got this master plan for delivering something fantastic. And by the time they get out there, morale is down. People are expecting something horrible. They're wondering if they're going to get layoff notes, and they'll go to roll out a new system or a new way of doing business or a new acquisition to massive amounts of resistance. And I think nothing kills projects Nothing kills new systems. Nothing can kill an acquisition other than a resistance psychology. And the best ways to beat it, really, number one, are communicate it to death. Tell people why it matters for them. And I wrote a lot about that in that book, the Process of Improvement. I really, probably a third of the book on the psychology of change and things that we've seen people do well. The other thing is really selecting, very intentionally selecting people who are pro change on their own. And one of the ways that we suggest looking for early adopters is looking for people who are already early adopters on their own. Not that they're holding their hand up saying, I'll volunteer to do it, because not all volunteers are early adopters. Early adopters are the ones who, when the new iPhone comes out and you're not even sure if it's got stable software on it, they've got it that day. They've got that new iWatch, or they're using the latest version beta AI model when it's not stable and they're risking the hallucinations, and because they want that latest thing. And so those personalities are attracted to change, they want to be early, and they're more likely to speak positively about the experience they have, even if it's challenging. And so getting people like that involved in change early engenders the idea that you're going to get feedback in a productive means, not feedback like, we hate this, please don't make us do double entry. They're going to say, this is awesome. And they're also, almost the more important thing is that they're going to share that feedback with others around the organization who you held off to be round two or round three, who begin to hear that, hey, what Natalie's working with, she says, is twice as fast as what we've got, and we can't get it yet. And they started asking people, hey, when are we going to get the new software? When are we going to get the new software? You create the inverse effect of what I've seen in these disastrous deployments, of projects, programs, plans, systems, et cetera, where people have that big bang in the back room. And so, like I said, one is the communication, another is getting those early adopters on board. And I think another piece is making it their solution. It doesn't matter whether you're making a procedural change, changing the way an organization runs, deciding to acquire another company or merge with another company. When people are told, some people like a little bit of micromanagement, but most like none. And it's the same thing. Some people like a surprise. Most prefer not to be surprised at all. And if you've got a big change coming along like that, bringing people in, if I know we should go this way, and I'm worried that my team's going to want to go this way, I'd rather bring them in and negotiate that we're halfway between those 2 points. But I do it on this condition. I say, I will make changes to this plan. I'll even maybe give them a veto on something if they can make a strong enough argument that they think we're headed in the wrong direction. And that's really powerful. It's costly to me. But then when we're going forward on a direction, and I think we should go this way, they think we should go this way, and we end up agreeing 45 degrees in between, I'm able to get a tacit agreement from them to say, look, if it turned out I was right and we should have gone this way, I will meet you halfway over here. If you guys give me your commitment, shake my hand, look me in the eyes, and tell me you'll do whatever it takes to get us back on course. And I'll tell you that if you turned out to be right and we belong over there, I'll do whatever it takes to get us to that course over there. So I think that's the third piece, is really a negotiated change. It's part of the reason I'm not an advocate of big bang changes. I really think small incremental improvements that show people value, that let people say, that was my idea, I told them they should change this thing and they did it. I think that's more important even than the system that you choose. If you're putting a new piece of technology in, I think it can even be more important than the people who lead the team, that you really take into account the psychology of the people who are going to be impacted by the change, because they dictate your customer experience. And at the end of the day, if you deliver a horrible employee experience, they will do a great job at delivering a horrible customer experience. And then you're in recovery mode. And that's usually when the people who do the big bang implementations leave, put the great success on their resume and go repeat it somewhere else, while the people who are really committed to the organization stay for the next 3 to 5 years and clean it up.
Right. I think those areas that you mentioned like really resonate. And I think there's, change that might be kind of a point in time where you're going through some change in the organization that has a start and end to it. But I think there's also, the AI phase that we're going through right now where, uh, there's
Yeah.
eventually an end, but just to a large degree, there's no end in sight. And so every leader right now, I think, needs to be navigating this change management for, themselves, what it means for kind of their role and how they work, their team, their organization. And so all these things that you're talking about kind of communicate uh, early and often, and probably what feels like more than you need to,
Yes.
thinking about the different kind of skills and kind of passions and strengths on the team and how to build the change and account for that. I know one of the mistakes that my team that I made as an organization a few years ago when we were just getting started with generative AI, that we started with everyone kind of experimenting and having that kind of R&D time, which was great to get everyone to a certain level. But then I continued that to kind of everyone has a similar role in our innovations. And we lost a little bit of time in that because not everyone kind of wanted to or could show up in the same way towards
Mm.
looking at kind of how do we reinvent a process? How do we kind of rethink how we do certain things with the kind of new tools that are out there? But really kind of right seat on the bus, bring it back to one of your Jim
Yes.
Collins references, right?
Yeah. Yeah, fantastic. That's absolutely right. That's one of the things I cover in there as well, that you end up finding people, and we talk about the business analyst brain a lot. Our software is targeted at business analysts, people who don't know how to write code, but they are wonderful resources because they've spent years studying what an organization does and writing it all down in big documents and spreadsheets and handing it to IT departments and then waiting in line for the IT guys to code it for them. And we're AI development is offering this. Ours is specifically we're much more laser focused on work management. So where I think you can do sort of vibe coding and build apps of any type. This is really an enterprise grade workflow application that's targeted at that business analyst brain. But that business analyst brain is something that can be trained. It is something that people can take college classes for, but it's also something that often emerges as a secondary trait for people in roles all across an organization. And you just nailed that you end up finding there are certain people that you can just throw at new technologies and they're an early adopter and they're going to pick it up. And there's also people that can get their head around mentally framing the mental model, framing up a process and thinking about how that flow works. And we're a visual tool that allows them to diagram it out. But somebody's got to have that capability in their mind to be able to see, just like people. Not everybody can flip real estate, right? Not everybody can walk into a home that looks an absolute mess and picture what it could look like fixed up. The same way in business, not everybody can look at a process that's broken and imagine ways that it could improve. But when you identify those people in the course of doing process improvement, that's a wonderful thing if you can empower them to become the continuous innovation sort of resources across the organization. So, by the way, I forgive me, I'm kind of curious to learn a little bit more about your business. You've asked me an awful lot of questions. I wonder if you couldn't share with me a couple of minutes of what you do.
Yeah, yeah, of course. So we're a go-to-market consultancy that works across the strategy and full service execution for companies, go to market and their marketing specifically. And a big focus for us is through kind of major moments of change in an organization. So it's kind of a change management component, but it's through the go to market lens, whether that's an early stage company that is building their go to market and their marketing kind of infrastructure and content and plan and all of that for the first time, or
Hmm.
organizations that maybe are going through kind of M&A activity or a services
Sure.
company launching their first product, or
Or a
different.
rebrand or something, right? Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. So kind of
Yeah.
big moments in a company and then what needs to change. And so there is a component of right, looking at the external kind of market strategy. There's looking at kind of the internal team and dynamics, like what assets does an organization have. And so while it's different than kind of a technology implementation necessarily, a lot of those kind of change management components very much hold true.
There's a lot of similar. I knew you were focused on marketing and on change management from some of the research I did on you as well. But that's terrific, and I see marketing. It it's very similar because actually it's one of the things that happens first here. If you can't make it here, if you can't get space in someone's head, there's another great book that's coming to mind, Crossing the Chasm by Jeff Moore. And you know, he talks a lot about positioning and getting to buy that space in somebody's head. That is a mental model that getting people who are, you talk about change too. We've been calling it something for 15 years, and you tell me you want to call it something different because we're going to resonate to the market better. You know, some people are going to adopt and gravitate to that, and others are going to run away. Um, I mentioned earlier, you know, we have two products, HighGear being one. We began to pick up a lot of manufacturing customers, and interestingly enough, we spun up another one just in the last year or so. We've gone through that double branding exercise. We have functionally the same software, but we reskinned it, and we had to come up with a new brand for it and functionally messaged it differently because our manufacturing customers care about very different things. And we're, you know, in some ways we're stripping it down from some things they don't care about that our other marketplaces do and trying to get them a lower price out there. But uh, it is a very difficult task to connect with a potential market and to message it correctly so that they resonate and respond. So I get the big change piece there. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think it goes back to a lot of the things that you were talking about earlier in the conversation, right? To connect with the market, whether it's one to one on the sales side or one to many on the marketing side,
Hmm.
being authentic, showing you understand the pain points. So kind of creating that human to human connection and understanding carries forth at this level and then carries into customer relationships.
Well, Natalie, I'll have to get you to go look at our job track website and give me your give me your professional opinion. But
Happy to take a look anytime, Vaughn. I know we only have a couple minutes left. I'd love to ask you maybe a more introspective question as we close, and wanted to find out what's the best piece of advice that you've been given that still shapes you today.
hmm, run into the fire. Um, at a really difficult time in the middle of that turnaround story that I told you about, um, I was having some staff challenges. I am still married by God's grace, closing in on 30 years and 6 kids and 2 grandkids and 2 more on the way. But, you know, my marriage was having difficulty because of the stress level that I was going through and the amount of time that I spent working. Um, and personal finances were tight, business finances were tight. We were starting to see the upturn, but it was just so much pressure. And in the middle of it, like I said, I was having a staff challenge with a key personnel. And it was somebody who'd been in business a lot longer than me. I've been self-employed most of my life. I've got about 30 years under my belt now, just like marriage. And at that point, I probably was about 13 or 14 years in, and there was a gentleman who had about 30 or 35 years of business experience, and he kind of he had that quiet moment. He put his hand on my shoulder, and he was listening to me sort of ramble about all these things I had going on and how overwhelmed I was and how in the middle of this I can't deal with this employee giving me this, you know. And he said, Vaughn, he said, somebody gave me this advice 15 years ago. I hope it's as useful to you as it is to me. He said, always, always run into the fire. And his point was, you know, he gave the longer version, and I won't give you the long version of it, but you know, the fire never gets cooler by leaving it alone. The fire always spreads, the fire always gets worse. And you imagine that the fire is going to burn you much worse than it does. You imagine there's no way you can run through it without getting burned. You often can. Um, so the longer it goes on, the worse it is for your own psychology. And as a leader, the psychology of a leader is really, really important. And so what it taught me, and I don't like it because, by my nature, I would rather avoid conflict and go running for the hills all the time. But I've had to learn by experience to follow that mantra, run into the fire. When there's a problem, when people aren't getting along, grab them immediately. When there's a customer who's concerned about something, call them right away. When it looks like there's an inevitable change coming, don't think about it or consternate on it. You know, trust your gut. It knows usually long before your mind does. Make the decision and move forward. But courageously confront the things that look most difficult. And most days you'll go home with most of them resolved. And if you let them linger and smolder, they'll still be burning tomorrow, and you'll have worried about them all night, and it won't have made them a bit better.
I think that's great advice. I have had some of those similar circumstances myself, so I think that's very widely applicable. So thank you for sharing that, Vaughn. And as we wrap up the conversation, if listeners want to get in touch, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, I'm easy to find on LinkedIn. Just Vaughn Thurman, Vaughn, last name Thurman. If anybody be interested in a copy of the book, I'm not trying to sell it. They can get a free one if they go to highgear.com. Under one of the menus, it says the Process of Improvement book. If you click on that, I think you don't have to share anything but an email address and a name and an address, I think, and we'll send you a copy out. And certainly, I can always be reached directly by just somebody calling the main office here and asking for me. I'll take a phone call from anybody. It's always an opportunity to learn, like I said before.
That's wonderful. Well, thank you so much. I think the book is a really great offer, so I know I'm going to be checking that out myself. And I really loved hearing so much of what you shared from kind of your story, where things were a bit on the brink and how you navigated that. Some of the messages around vulnerability and the impact and benefit that has, and some of the insights and advice around change management. So thank you so much for that.
Oh, thank you, Natalie. Thanks for having me on. It's been a pleasure to talk to you, and I look forward to seeing when it goes live. Please let me know, and look forward to talking to you again, I hope.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Great conversation. And thank you too to everyone who's listening. If today's conversation sparked something for you, and I'm sure that it did, please pass this along to another leader, because we know that insights like these fuel fresh thinking and help all of us drive real transformation in our companies and in ourselves. This has been another amazing conversation on Shift and Thrive. I'll see you all next time. That's a wrap for this week's episode. For show notes and more, visit shiftandthrivepodcast.com. A special thank you to our sponsor, Magnitude Consulting, bringing you the thinking power of a growth consultancy and the getting it done power of a full-service marketing agency to help B2B companies fuel their growth. For more information on Magnitude and to get your complimentary transformation readiness assessment, visit magnitudeconsulting.com/getready. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next week.